Everybody loves a good mystery. But what happens when a mystery never has its satisfying ending? The following unsolved police cases are strange, creepy, and frustratingly without a conclusion. They are some of the most baffling unsolved mysteries of our time. Here are 5 frustrating unsolved murder cases that will bring shivers down your spine. Number 5. Lady of the Dunes. She was found on July 26, 1974, lying face down on a beach towel in the dunes near Provincetown, Massachusetts. Her hands were missing, and small piles of pine needles were left in their place. Her head had been crushed and nearly severed from her body, possibly with some sort of military entrenching tool. Police suggested she could have died weeks before the July 26 discovery. With no clear way to identify her, the victim soon became known as the Lady of the Dunes. Who she is, why she was slain so brutally, and who ended her life are all mysteries that remain unsolved to this day. When she was discovered, police conducted extensive searches of the surrounding dunes, combed through missing person files, and compared tire tracks found near the scene to those of countless vehicles. Yet they found nothing to explain the murder of the Lady of the Dunes. Over the years, police as well as amateur sleuths have pursued and put forth a wide variety of possible leads in the case. At one time, it was thought that the Lady of the Dunes may have been another victim of serial killer Tony Costa, but Costa was convicted of his crimes in 1970 and hanged himself in his cell in May of 1974 before the lady was killed. Others attribute her death to notorious mobster Whitey Bulger, who was known to have removed some of his victims' teeth, but no connection between the lady and Bulger has ever been established. In 2004, serial killer Haddon Clark confessed to the murder of the Lady of the Dunes, saying that he had evidence that the police needed buried in his grandfather's garden. Clark, however, suffers from paranoid schizophrenia, and authorities doubt the veracity of his claims to this and several other murders. The case remains unsolved to this day. Number 4. The brutal 1959 murder of the Walker family. On December 19, 1959, the entire Walker family was brutally murdered in their home in Osprey, Florida. 24-year-old Christine Walker was raped before being shot to death, while Christine's husband Cliff, 25, and their children, 3-year-old Jimmy and 1-year-old Debbie, were all shot to death. Clues found during the investigation included a bloody cowboy boot and a fingerprint on the handle of the bathtub faucet. Despite these clues, and despite upward of 500 suspects over the years, the case could not be solved. In 2010, however, over 50 years after the crime, the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office took another crack at the Walker family murders case. Authorities acted on a lead that connected the 1959 murder of the Walker family with an earlier and much more famous crime: the slaying of the Clutter family, the very case that inspired Truman Capote's groundbreaking book, In Cold Blood. About a month before the Walker family slaying occurred, the Clutters were killed in their Holcomb, Kansas home by Perry Smith and Richard Dick Hickok. The Clutter case bore eerie similarities to the Walker case. Both were quadruple homicides, with both parents and 2 children slaughtered. The Clutters' other children escaped the violence because they were not home at the time. After killing the Clutter family, Hickok and Smith fled to Florida in a stolen car, where they bought items from a department store in Sarasota, just a few miles away from the Walker home, on the very day that the Walkers were killed. According to the sheriff's department, the Walkers had been considering buying a car of the exact make and model that Hickok and Smith had stolen. This might have been how the 2 men gained access to the Walker home. On the pretense of selling their car, Hickok and Smith confessed to the murders of the Clutter family, for which they were hanged in April of 1965. Authorities suspected the pair of murdering the Walkers as well, but could never secure a charge after Hickok and Smith were cleared by the results of a polygraph test. Truman Capote devoted several pages of In Cold Blood to the murder of the Walkers, but ultimately concluded that Hickok and Smith couldn't have been the killers, as they had alibis. Despite what Capote asserted at the time, subsequent investigations have since revealed holes in Hickok and Smith's alibis, and some experts have asserted that polygraph tests of the era were notoriously unreliable. In December of 2012, the Sarasota County Sheriff's Department requested a court order to exhume the bodies of Hickok and Smith in order to run DNA tests in an attempt to connect them to the Walker family murders. The bodies were exhumed on December 18, 2012, but it wasn't until August of 2013 that results were officially announced. Unfortunately, the results proved inconclusive. Due to the passage of time, only partial samples could be retrieved from the bodies, and these could not be matched to samples taken from the Walker home. Despite this, many still believe that Hickok and Smith are the most likely suspects in the slaying. With Hickok and Smith long dead and now reburied, it's likely their connection to the Walker murders will remain strictly hypothetical. Number 3, Edgar Allan Poe and the mysterious murder of New York beauty Mary Rogers. Edgar Allan Poe's 1842 murder mystery novella The Mystery of Marie Roget tells the story of Marie Roget, a beautiful young Parisian woman whose body is found, battered and bruised, in the Seine River. The tale captivated audiences during its date perhaps because, save for the victim's name and the location of her death, the story was true. In creating his story, Poe explicitly borrowed details from the real-life slaying of Mary Cecilia Rogers, a young New Yorker known to many as the beautiful cigar girl who worked in a downtown tobacco shop. Born in 1820, Mary was the only daughter of a widowed boarding house owner. After Mary's father died when she was only 17, the young woman took a job at John Anderson's tobacco shop. She soon began earning a more than common wage, as she so easily attracted new customers into the store. Mary was so well known for her beauty, in fact, that patrons traveled to the tobacco shop solely to see the beautiful cigar girl at work behind the counter. Daniel Stoshower notes in his book, The Beautiful Cigar Girl, Mary Rogers, Edgar Allan Poe, and the Invention of Murder, that everyone from journalists to famed writers Washington Irving and James Fenimore Cooper sought out the shop. One scribe was so moved by Mary's presence that he immortalized her in a poem. As Stoshower puts it, Mary achieved a curious form of celebrity, becoming perhaps the first woman in New York to be famous for being talked about. Then, in 1841, tragedy struck. On Sunday, July 25, Mary told her mother and fiancé Daniel Payne that she was going to visit family in New Jersey. She would be back the next day, she said. When Mary failed to return by Monday afternoon, her mother assumed it was due to nasty weather. But when the sky darkened and Mary was nowhere to be seen, her mother grew worried. Strangely, this wasn't the first time Mary had been reported missing. Just 3 years before, the New York Sun reported that Mary Rogers had vanished. She reappeared a few days later, and many thought it was a publicity stunt by the newspapers to increase their readership. This time, however, it was different. On Wednesday, July 28, Mary's body was found in the Hudson River near Hoboken, New Jersey. A group of men had spotted something strange in the river, rowed out to it, and dragged back what soon would be identified as Mary's battered body. The young woman's dress and hat were ripped, and she appeared to have endured a struggle. Speculation swirled about just what had transpired. Some said Mary died during a botched abortion, and her body was discarded in the Hudson. Others blamed the fiancé Daniel Payne, suggesting that a heated quarrel erupted between the young lovers and ended in death. Still others contended she had been caught up in gang-related violence. With so many theories swirling, Edgar Allan Poe stepped in. Using his technique of ratiocination, a thought process guided by rational reasoning and deliberate inference, Poe wrote The Mystery of Marie Roget. The novella featured Poe's legendary protagonist C. August Dupin. Changing just a few key details and having Marie work in a perfumery, Poe recreated the story of Mary's murder, publicly attempting to sort through the details alongside police detectives. The author hoped to process the case through his writing, unraveling its mystery and possibly revealing the truth of Mary's fate. Many consider it to be the first true crime novel. A fictional piece of writing based on a real-life crime. Unfortunately, there was no conclusive ending to the mystery of Mary Rogers' murder, either in fiction or in the real world. Less than 3 months after her death, Mary's fiancé went to the place where her body had been found and committed suicide. He left a note that read, "To the world, here I am on the very spot. May God forgive me for my misspent life." Then, a year later, a woman in Hoboken came forward, definitively declaring that the girl's death had been the cause of a faulty abortion. This claim, however, was never confirmed. Like Poe's C. August Dupin, investigators never cracked the case of the New York beauty's death. Mary Cecilia Rogers' demise remains unsolved to this day, yet the tale of her charmed life and tragic, mysterious end lives on. Number 2. The chilling unsolved murder of the Grimes sisters. Like thousands of teenage girls in those days, the Grimes sisters could not get enough of Elvis Presley. They had seen his latest hit, Love Me Tender, 14 times. On December 17, 1956, they headed to Chicago's Brighton Theater to see it again. Barbara was 15, Patricia was 13. They left the house at 7:30 p.m. Their mother Loretta Grimes expected the girls might stay for the double feature. But when midnight arrived and her girls hadn't come home, she got worried. Two of the older Grimes siblings headed to the bus stop to wait for their sisters. By 2 a.m. it was clear something had happened. A search was quickly assembled. Dorothy Weinert, a friend of Patricia's, had also been in the theater and sat behind the sisters. Though Dorothy left after the first film, she mentioned having seen Barbara and Patricia at the concession stand, seemingly in good spirits. One of the largest citywide hunts in Chicago history followed. Police officers and regular civilians combed the streets looking for the sisters. Adjacent towns and counties got involved and offered their resources to the cause. But as the days passed, the search stalled and law enforcement grew desperate to solve the case. Then, random sightings of the missing sisters flooded media outlets. People from all walks of life claimed to have seen the girls in one state or another, from as far away as Nashville, Tennessee. This led some to believe that Barbara and Patricia had orchestrated their own disappearance and gone to Nashville to meet Elvis. This theory picked up more steam than expected, and Elvis himself took to the radio to publicly address the girls, pleading with them to return home. Police had no other leads and could only surmise that the sisters had run away. Loretta Grimes vehemently rejected the idea, maintaining that her girls would never do such a thing and that they certainly would not have left behind the brand new radio they received for Christmas. After an exhausting month of loose threads and dead ends, the search stalled out. Then, on January 22, 1957, a man named Leonard Prescott spotted what he thought were two mannequins on German Church Road in Willow Springs, Illinois. He did not approach them, but instead ran home to get his wife. Together, the Prescotts inched closer and found the naked bodies of Barbara and Patricia Grimes, positioned awkwardly, with Barbara lying face down and Patricia lying face up on top of her sister. Their faces had been damaged by neighborhood animals. At 1:30 p.m., the Willow Springs Police Department learned of the discovery. They immediately deduced that the sisters had probably been on the side of the road since the snowfall 2 weeks prior. Flurries of suspects were apprehended, the most publicized of which was Edward Lee Bedwell. He confessed to the murders, though there was never any evidence supporting his claim, and he later recanted it. An autopsy on the girls, which could not be performed until they were thawed, revealed that the last meal they'd eaten was their dinner before leaving for the movie theater. Such findings proved that the Grimes sisters were killed within hours of going missing. Though the official cause of death was listed as murder, the only explanation offered was secondary shock due to exposure to the elements. The funeral was held on January 28, 1957, at St. Maurice Church. Loretta Grimes was inconsolable. The girls were in white closed caskets, each topped with their respective photograph. They were laid to rest at Holy Sepulchre Catholic Cemetery. Later in life, Loretta volunteered at a nearby prison and secured a promise from the police that they would never stop looking for her daughter's killer. In 1989, at the age of 83, Loretta died without ever getting an answer. Though the disappearance and murder of the Grimes sisters went cold many years ago, author and former criminal investigator Ray Johnson may have cracked it open. Johnson claims that a similar incident, the murder of Bonnie Lee Scott, took place in Addison, Illinois, about a year after the Grimes case. Bonnie Lee Scott was killed at the age of 15 and eventually discovered naked. The man responsible for that crime supposedly made a phone call to Loretta Grimes and bragged about getting away with the murders of both Scott and the Grimes sisters. Johnson asserts that information about this phone call went unpublished by the media back in the 1950s, and also that non-lethal marks on the Grimes sisters' bodies, around the abdomen, were very similar to marks found on the body of Scott. Lastly, Johnson claims to have spoken to a third girl who was abducted with the Grimes sisters, but escaped. She was 14 years old at the time and did not come forward out of fear. Charles Leroy Melquist was convicted for the murder of Bonnie Lee Scott and sentenced to 99 years in prison. He served 11 years of his sentence before his release and later married and had 2 children. Melquist was never officially implicated in the Grimes killings. The case of the Grimes sisters remains unsolved. However, a Facebook group administrated by Johnson, called Help Solve Chicago's Grimes Sisters Murder Today, has around 1,380 members. Number 1. Who killed Carolyn Leward? Carolyn and Major General Charles Leward were upstanding members of their community in Kent, England. Then, tragedy struck, robbing them of the life they had built and enjoyed together. First, Carolyn was found murdered at a neighbor's country home in Sealchart, Kent. Just weeks later, Charles took his own life. And though there's been much speculation, the case, widely known as the Seal Chart murder, was never conclusively solved. Charles Leward was a former military man, a golfer, and a local politician who had founded the Patriotic Party. Carolyn Leward was a well-liked friend, neighbor, and frequent volunteer for charitable causes. The parents of 2 grown sons, the couple was settling into the golden years of their life. Their social standing, as upper-class members of late Victorian society, made their untimely deaths particularly shocking and notable. The series of events began on August 24, 1908, a typical summer's day for 58-year-old Carolyn and 69-year-old Charles. They left their home together, on foot. At 2:30 p.m. Charles was headed to the golf club to retrieve his clubs, while Carolyn was planning to enjoy some exercise before returning to the house for afternoon tea with a friend. At 3 p.m., they parted ways at a particular gate. She headed through the gate and down a path that would take her through the woods, past their neighbor's mostly unused summer house, and back to their home. Charles traveled onward to the golf club. Little did the couple know it would be the last time they ever bid each other farewell. Various townspeople saw the Major General over the next 35 minutes as he made his way to the club. At around 4:05 p.m., after leaving the club, the local vicar, driving in the opposite direction, promised him a ride home after completing an errand. The Reverend made good on this word, driving by again and picking Charles up at 4:20 p.m. and depositing him at his home at 4:25 p.m. Arriving at home, Charles was surprised to find Mrs. Stewart, the friend Carolyn had promised to host for tea, waiting patiently for his wife's return. Upon realizing Carolyn was missing, Charles set off in search of her at 4:30 p.m. 45 minutes later. His search ended when he found her lifeless body on the veranda of their neighbor's summer house. She had been shot in the back of the head twice, and her purse and rings were missing. No cartridges could be found. In fact, there was no evidence of the killer at all, save for a few footprints. In the aftermath of Carolyn's murder, many strangers and self-proclaimed experts determined that Charles had killed his wife, despite his tight alibi. He could account for his whereabouts at 3:15 p.m., the estimated time of the murder based on the accounts of a neighbor and a gardener, both of whom heard 3 shots fired in the general direction of the summer house. Furthermore, the Major General offered up all 3 of the revolvers he owned to the authorities, and none matched the bullet holes found in Carolyn's skull. Still, rumors proclaiming Charles's guilt spread. Some believed that Carolyn's missing rings had in fact been taken by Charles to throw police off of his trail. Soon, Charles was receiving hate mail from people vehemently accusing him of his wife's murder. As the days progressed with no new evidence leading to any likely suspect, Charles's hope of finding Carolyn's killer dwindled. Devastated, and a pariah in his community, he put his home up for sale. A member of parliament, Colonel Ward, offered Charles a place to stay. On September 17, as soon as the official inquest had ended, Colonel Ward collected the Major General and took him home. Additionally, the Leward son, stationed in South Africa, had finally gotten news of the family tragedy. He was en route to England to be with his father the following day. On the morning of September 18, the day his son was due to arrive, Charles Leward woke up, showered, and walked to the local train station. There, he hid in the bushes beside the track, then committed suicide by jumping in front of a passing train. The General Major met his tragic end less than a month after his wife met hers. Leward's suicide fanned the flames of the Seal Chart murder mystery. In the ensuing years, investigators came to believe the crime was committed by someone Carolyn knew, rather than by a random passerby. They thought her rings had been taken in an attempt to mislead the authorities to the true motive of the murder. In 1914, Sir Sidney Orme Rowan Hamilton, who went on to serve as Chief Justice of Bermuda in the 1930s, wrote a book about the unsolved murder that explored this line of thinking. He put forth the notion that Carolyn's killer was a man named John Dickman. Dickman was sentenced to death in 1910 for murdering a man on a train. Rowan Hamilton asserted that Dickman was connected to Carolyn Leward through an advertisement the former placed in the Times. He believed that Carolyn responded to John Dickman's advertisement, asking for financial help by sending him a check, which Dickman then forged, possibly by changing the amount. Upon discovering the forgery, Carolyn contacted the man and arranged to meet with him, without telling her husband. So the theory goes, Dickman then murdered Carolyn at this meeting to cover his tracks. This is just a theory, however, and has never been conclusively proven. To this day, the Seal Chart murder case remains unsolved. Those were our 5 frustrating unsolved murder cases. Which one did you find the most disturbing? Like and subscribe if you enjoyed our video. Thanks for watching.